Right, today guys I've got a new easy way to apply resin to tile mitre joints. I've got some to do in this wet room with these angles going into this door, and I'll be finishing them off with epoxy grout, which comes in this really neat system. GoPoxy kindly sent me this product to try out, so instead of mixing epoxy by hand, it comes in a pre-mixed tube system where the activator and colour mix together in the nozzle. So I was keen to see how it performed compared to normal resin mixing and how the final finish looked. Let's jump into it. So first I had to get some tiles on the wall. For this job the side mitres were only 22 degrees, so my thought was I could get away with just mitring one tile per joint. To test it, I cut a mitre strip and checked it against the normal edge, and that worked pretty well, so that saved me a ton of time, especially with cutting these 1.2 metre porcelain tiles. With that sorted, I could start tiling. When working with mitres, it's really important to keep everything flat and level, otherwise you'll end up with an uneven line. Adhesive adds thickness, so I double check the mitre again before moving on. Then just cutting the tiles on a Sigma cutter made easy work of all the sealing and side cuts. From there I got all the main wall tiles up, then I could start fixing the internal mitres, which all went in pretty easy. Once those were done, I cleaned up the joints and grouted the main wall areas with cement grout, so the mitre joints were ready for the epoxy. I then just repeated that process on the other wall. For the top door cut, I had a normal 45-degree mitre into a slanted ceiling with mitres on three sides, and I can tell you that was a fun cut to do. It wasn't my best cut, with the back edge being a bit rougher than I wanted, but I wasn't too concerned as I knew the epoxy should smooth that all out. And that was the tiling done. So this is the kit GoPoxy sent me. It comes with everything you need. These are the epoxy tubes in a mid-grey colour. There's a bag that comes with various shaping tools for different scenarios, a scraper to remove excess epoxy once dry, a cloth and some instructions. You get the wax, which I think is a really neat idea to save time taping the tiles by acting as a release agent, and you get a sturdy sealant gun for applying it. Each colour box includes a nozzle which mixes the two components, the epoxy itself, and you can see the two tubes, one colour and one accelerator. And you just load it into the gun like a regular sealant tube, remove the cap and attach the nozzle. You can cut that to your desired joint size if needed. Before applying the epoxy, you need to rub the wax about an inch on either side of the tile joint. Since it was my first time using it, I probably went a bit OT with it, but I thought too much is better than too little. So removing the cap exposes the two compartments, then the nozzle just needs to be screwed on. Now it's important here to just squeeze out about 30 centimeters of epoxy first to ensure it's all properly mixed. And unlike me, remember to release the pressure so it stops squirting out. And now that's ready to use. So starting from the top, I ran a bead of epoxy down the joint just like silicone. My goal was to fill the joint fully before shaping it. I picked the tool that looked best suited for this angle. Now this is where my inexperience with the product came in. That first run you see there was actually perfect, but because I was a bit unsure, I went over it a few times and made it a bit harder than it needed to be, as I was removing some of the product in areas from multiple passes. So I had to fill the joint again in some areas. I cleaned the tool up with some wet wipes and went for a better fresh run. I don't think the 22-degree angle did me many favours here, and I found if you can do it in one motion you get the best finish. But I got there in the end and was happy with the final result. Now I was just hoping the scraper would do its job when it all dries. The left side went much smoother now I had the hang of it. I applied the wax, ran the epoxy and shaped it first try. The top mitre at 45 degrees was also pretty easy as the angle tool was shaped perfectly for that one. Just a couple of passes and I had a nice edge. At this point it was just a case of waiting overnight. The epoxy takes about 3 to 12 hours to dry depending on temperature, so now I just had to hope it cleaned off the tiles as stated. The next morning the epoxy had set rock solid, so it was time for the cleanup. And I have to say the wax did its job. The dried epoxy peeled off the tile easily, which was really satisfying. I went around scraping off all the excess resin. It just needed a couple of goes to fine tune it, and once I got most of that off I went over it with a 240 grit piece of sandpaper to smooth the joint over and remove any imperfections. After a final clean-up, this is how it turned out, and I'm pretty happy with that. I achieved the rounded edge finish I wanted, and it feels rock solid, which will help protect the mitres long term. Overall, I'd say this was a great product to use. Having the pre-made colours is super handy for matching tiles, and once I got used to it, application was straightforward. Plus the pre-waxing made the clean-up super easy, so all in all it was quick and effective. This system is also designed for using in regular grout joints, and it comes in a range of matte and satin colours, so I'll definitely be testing that out in the future. I'll leave some links in the description to the product, and if you're interested in the pros and cons of epoxy grout, check out this video right here. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.